could be joining. I know some folks have to leave. First of all, can everybody hear me sufficiently? I hope we've got good connections. If something happens, don't worry. Sometimes I drop my feed. I will run out and get a better feed, but don't worry. I'm not running away. So anyway, hey, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for investing your time here this afternoon on this important call. I know most of you. I think I do know almost everybody, but let me introduce myself. I'm Bill Fyander. I'm Director for the City of Topeka Planning and Development Department. I have asked you, and I think you've graciously agreed, if you're here, that's a good sign, be part of an ad hoc committee to help develop an implementation plan for the recently adopted citywide housing study, market study and strategy. This task that we've been asked to take on came at the direction of the Topeka governing body last month when they adopted the findings of the plan. I will go into some particulars later on, but suffice to say we have about 60 days or so with this group to make some recommendations as to what actions we will be taking in the coming year to start the study's implementation. So we've got, I'm trying to count here, but we've got about, well, definitely over 20, plus 20 good minds representing a cross-section of the city's affordable housing landscape. So I'm very thankful you spent your time here. What we started to do, what we are continuing to do is build upon the steering committee's work that guided much of the study. So the folks who are representing this ad hoc group include the steering committee. I'm looking at, I think most of the folks that were on the steering committee have continued to re-up their contract to continue their work. And that includes, and I think I'll just recognize you guys, make sure you can, if you want to raise your hand or just acknowledge you. I'm trying to be a little more efficient here. But on the steering committee, we've got Ivan Weichert representing Builders Association. I don't see James Kraut on the call yet. He was representing the CAC as the chair. We have Lloyd Range from Capital Federal. Thanks, Lloyd. Teresa Baker, I see Teresa from HCCI. We got Stephen Schuffelbein from Jump. There's Steve. Thank you, Steve. Jeanette Spurgeon from Kansas Housing Resource. Hi, Jeanette. Rick Creedy. I don't see Rick on here. He did accept from Pioneer Group. We got Linda Bryden from Sunflower Realtors. Trey George. I know Trey's on here. Trey George, Topeka Housing Authority. Katrina Ringler. Hi, Katrina, from Topeka Planning Commission and the State Historic Preservation Office. I think I got the steering committee folks. We also added to that group that included any of the organizations that sponsored the study, help funding it. That included Community Action, and Tawny Stottlemyre. I think Tawny is on it. Hi, Tawny. Community Foundation, Marcia Pope, and Kathy Smith. Hi, Marcia. I see Kathy. Where's Kathy? Kathy's somewhere. Kathy's down there. Kathy's on. Cornerstone. I see Chris. Chris looking as good as always with that picture. Thank you, Chris. You're on here twice, Chris. That's how good you are. You're one of the affordable housing providers too. So we got Chris from Cornerstone. We have Nikki Ramirez Jennings from Sense. Nikki, I think I've seen you on there. Yes, hi, Nikki. Janice Watkins from Habitat. Hi, Janice. And then we have the others covered there under housing providers. So thank you. We also added some representatives from the neighborhoods. The CAC, I spoke about James, who should be on, but we also have representing CAC. I don't see Susan McClatchy. I don't know if she's on. And then we have Michael Bell. I know he's on. Hi, Mike. Good to see you. And Margot Rangel. She is on. So thank you, guys. Thank you. Appreciate that use of the thumbs. We also have a representation from landlords and the Landlord Association. That includes Steve Vogel. Welcome, Steve, and Charlene Roebuck. Welcome you both. Thank you for being here. We also will have a team from the city. That includes governing body members. We have Councilwoman Christina Valdivia Alcala. Thank you. Councilwoman Karen Hiller. And I believe, yes, and Councilman Spencer Duncan is on as well. Or what? Yes. He was. We also have City Manager Brent Trout. And then my team that's helping us along here includes Dan Warner, our Comprehensive Planning Manager, Corey Wright, Head of our Housing Division, and Bryson Risley, our Neighborhood Planner and Analyst. He will be taking minutes today, and we should be recording this as well. We want to make this as public as much as we can. We'll be putting it on the website, and so recording and taking minutes to make sure we capture everything. So that was my brief little intro to get everybody introduced. I guess so my role is really to be, I'm kind of a combined MC and traffic cop today, trying to keep us on task while trying to lean on you and everybody here with good discussion to accomplish our first meeting goals. So let's just jump into the agenda, and let me bring that up here. Okay, so our meeting one objective, and we'll go over much of this, but it's really to agree on what our work is, which is our scope. So I'll go over a scope here in a little bit. We want to have consensus on what tactics we want to activate that first year to implement the study, and then also what types of measurements, metric types, do we think would be good to measure our progress in that first year and even beyond. So that's our first meeting objective. And so it's going to be a lot about the what, not, what is it that we want to accomplish? What is it? Do we agree on those tasks? We may stray into a little bit of the how. It's hard not to, some solutions. That's really what's going to be our second meeting. And our second meeting is going to get into more of that, about what actions we really need to accomplish, and then the actual measurements themselves. So I might need to pull you back if we stray too far, but it's always good to hear, folks that want to elaborate. But we just need to hopefully stay on task to get our first meeting goals done. So that's the intent here. And what we thought we would do is, I'm going to stop sharing. We're going to kick it off with Dan Warner. He's going to do a brief housing study overview, just to refresh everybody's memory where we left off, and then we'll launch into our scope of work and get down into it. So I see Dan's loading up the presentation and the overview. So when you're ready, Dan, take it away.
Okay, thanks, Bill. Yeah, so I'm going to give you a relatively brief summary of the market study and strategy. Some of you may have seen bits and parts of this before, but some of this is probably new information too, so let's get started. There are a number of key themes that emerge from this housing study and strategy. I'm just going to touch on a couple. The third one there, the priority strategies, are focused on affordable housing because that is the greatest need and requires the most resources. And then the last one there, and importantly, this housing strategy is flexible and should be evaluated regularly. And that's some of the point of the meeting today, is to talk about that. There are a number of key findings and associated needs from the market analysis portion of the study. And again, I'll just touch on a few of these. So the first one at the top there, 30% of Topeka households are cost burdened. So the need there is quality, affordable rental housing that's less than $700 a month. Keyword there is quality, so quality affordable housing. Third one down, the key finding is lack of reinvestment in core neighborhoods. And so the associated need there is to reinvest in the existing housing stock. And then finally, Topeka has a high rate of homelessness and evictions for a city its size. So the need here is transitional housing for homeless and other vulnerable households. This next slide is a equity slide, so neighborhoods and equity. So along the left-hand side of that chart is cost burden households. So this is the percentage of cost burden households in a neighborhood. And you can see the neighborhoods that are the target areas from the study are along the line there. And then on the bottom is the percentage of minority households. So the takeaway here is the higher the neighborhood is on the chart and the farther to the right means they're higher, they have a greater percentage of cost burden and a higher percentage of minority households. So the takeaway there is that the cost burden is a greater hardship for minorities. So the housing study also put forth a market analysis. It was a big portion of the housing study. And this is the 20-year demand summary. So on the left-hand side, the first one there is affordable housing. So there's a demand for 4,000 units of affordable housing. And so affordable housing is defined as the housing that is less than 60% AMI, which is the area median income. The next one there is workforce housing. So 3,650 units of new workforce housing. And workforce housing is defined as 60 to 120% AMI. The market rate housing, there's a demand for 4,700 units. And then on the right-hand side, senior housing, which has different aspects to it: affordable, market rate, independent, and assisted living. There's a market for 2,250 of new senior housing units. There are 6 strategies and 27 tactics that advance the goals of the housing study. We're not going to go over all 27 tactics today, but I am going to talk about the 6 strategies, at least tell you what they are. So the first one there is improve quality of the existing housing stock. Second is to address abandoned and vacant properties. Third is to expand resources to encourage housing stability and support home ownership. Fourth, support development of a diverse mix of housing types. 6, expand production of affordable housing to enhance economic mobility. And finally, expand financial and organizational capacity. So there are a number of, so all 27 tactics are divided amongst those 6 strategies. And the housing study took those 27 tactics and synthesized them down to priority recommendations. So the priority recommendation is on the left-hand side of that slide. The impact or the return on investment from that recommendation is on on the right. So the first identified recommendation is to fund the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Next is to establish a strategic land bank. Third, expand community development ecosystem, which is the Community Development Corporation, the CDCs. And then finally, expand key programs. So weatherization and repair. These are programs that we currently have, but to make them larger and have a greater impact. The housing study does a good job of talking about an incremental approach to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So the funding target has been identified in the housing study as $3 million. We obviously don't have $3 million currently. So the idea here is to start year one with a pilot project or an incremental approach here. So the city seeds the trust fund to a certain level, and there's a partner matches, so about 500,000. So the impact or the focus there would be weatherization, renovation, small infill projects, about 25 to 30 units. So by creating a year one sort of pilot project and showing success and progress with the trust fund, then year two could be a larger amount, and year three and so on. And then at some point, getting to the stage where we have $3 million and it's a dedicated income stream for that particular trust fund. So next is roles for the city and its partners. So the city's role is identified. So for instance, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, the city's role there is to seed, administer, and partner. And then the partners in the trust fund would be philanthropy and the business community. Another example is the support community development corporations, or CDCs. So the city's role in that particular strategy is to facilitate, and then the partners are CDCs or national organizations. So those are the new efforts. Under expanded efforts, weatherization, for example, the city's role is to partner, and then the partners are nonprofits and others that are doing the work. So as you see in the roles for the city here are more often than not of a partner, of a policy. So it really emphasizes how important it is that we get partners to help implement this housing strategy. So the study takes kind of another level of prioritization to the strategies and establishes priorities for short-term, midterm, and long-term. So short-term, 1 to 3 years, midterm, 4 to 6, and long-term. The strategies we've talked about, the priority strategies we've talked about currently are the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, weatherization, rehab, kind of the 1-year projects. But also within the short term, on the left there are other strategies. So you can see there's other things that are in the hopper, so to speak, that can be implemented in the next few years. And then to go a little step further, we do have all the strategies identified here, but what we're showing here are the ones that are shaded. Those are what are considered the short-term years 1 to 3. So there's about 15 of those strategies that are considered short-term. So in conclusion, partnerships and expanding capacity are critical. And then finally, goals are important, but flexibility is key as successes and new opportunities arise. And that's all I have.
All right, thank you, Dan. A lot of that, I don't know how much is treading over old ground for some of you. Some of it's new, just refreshing. We're going to touch on a couple of those things today in a little more detail, particularly on the implementation side of things. So what that leads us into next is really a good platform for our scope. And what we just need to, it's one of our tasks, is to have some consensus on what it is that we are, what's our work program for the next 60 days or so. So let me start out, I'll bring this up. this is the scope for that we drafted, and want to make sure we get your thoughts, comments, questions on it before we move forward. At the top there, you see that there was a motion made by a governing body that adopt the study as an invaluable collection of data and strategy options, and requested the city manager work with citizens, staff, providers, and council to draft a starting implementation plan in 120 days. That was back in July. So we're about 30 days in right now to that 120 days. So translating that more into sort of our purpose, we recommended that what that really gets to is we need to develop an action plan for next year, for 2021, that kickstarts the recommendations of the study, and do it in time to report back to the governing body by November 17th, which would be the end of that 120-day horizon. So included within that scope, obviously, again, time period that we are most concerned with would be that first year, that next year, January through December. The primary focus would be affordable housing as the greatest need. We will always consider other non-affordable housing type actions, but that is our primary focus first year. Process. We're meeting today. We're planning on 3 committee meetings with you. One now, one in September, one in October. And again, today's is just about the what. Meeting 2 will be more about the how. Meeting 3 will be trying to wrap that up into something that is coherent. Public engagement. This was somehow we need to be involving that piece. So we'll talk about that later. Survey and data collection, whatever, if we do need survey, whatever data we need to make decisions. Okay, so the scope really, the main part of the scope revolves around 3 main questions. That first question is about which short-term tactics should be activated in the next 12 months. I've called that as sort of a tier A. The tier A is, again, those things that we really want to do and activate and get going, and not leave to another year or further out. What are those actions and timelines? Who is accountable? Lead and support roles. So that's that first question. Similarly, we want to ask a question about which tactics should we be planning for activation in the next 12 months. So not necessarily thinking we are activating the tactic, but more we are working towards that in that first year. So that's more of a tier B. Again, that's my terminology. Just kind of think through those things in terms of priorities. Actions, timelines, who's accountable, lead support role, same thing. And then last question would be, how do we track our progress? How do we track and evaluate the progress of the plan? And that leads us to deciding on the types of measurements, metrics, and targets. And I broke those down just, for instance, into investment, some basic unit counts, and then some more advanced sort of metrics and targets that are in the study themselves and that you may find very useful to recommend us use. We also have to ask, is there someone providing oversight, providing that direction that in that first year? And then when do we update? So those are sort of the evaluation part. I've gone over the committee makeup already at the beginning. So that sort of is inclusive of what we think we need to accomplish, the big tasks, the big questions. I'll ask you if anybody, first of all, if there's any questions or comments about that. Is there anything that was not, that we need to make more clear in the scope? Anything that's missing, or any concerns? hopefully nobody's talking with their mute on, because I can't necessarily see everybody. Karen, your mute is off.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you. I couldn't find it there. As the person who made that motion, I wanted the wording and so on. And the motion was to adopt the study as an invaluable collection of data and strategy options, rather than as a plan or whatever, that it was a collection of options that we really accepted, and then request the city manager to get an implementation plan going, as Bill read. It has taken me a while to sort of figure out what that fundamental concern was, but what I felt and what I would like to share and then encourage is that once all the data was gathered, and it was tremendous, that we fell off and moved into a project orientation instead of staying with that original goal, which was how many affordable housing units do we need? How many can we accomplish? And how are we going to do it? Which, of course, some new strategies would fit into, but we wouldn't do them out of context of, if we need 4,000 more affordable housing units, would this committee take the time to say, how fast do we want to get there? How do we have different techniques that could move us quickly? How do we put it together? And I also am thinking, maybe everyone knows, but at this point we have put the approval of the consolidated plan on hold as well, based on this work. Let the new 5-year consolidated plan be voted in at the same time as this affordable housing plan is. To me, I'd like to see us do a 3-way integrated plan, and that would be affordable housing, code compliance, and the consolidated plan. They are all linked with one another, and we could set whatever goals we want, use the tools that we want, our measures, and Bill, you did a great job with this sheet, but our measures are down there at the bottom. If we don't set our data and our goals first, we can't measure, but those would drive us to have them. How many units do we want to do a year? I don't want to just do 4, I guess, because the goal of all this was to really improve our entire collection of safe and or quality, as you say, and affordable housing. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I hope that there is a desire on the part of the rest of the group to really give us a big picture base and really go after this. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, anybody else? Thoughts? Is this if I can ask Karen, so would you propose that we change the scope, or should we get into our rest of our agenda and kind of flesh that out some more?
It's up to you, but I think where that fits is under scope, where you have primary focus, affordable housing actions. What does that mean? And I think it also really that overall set of goals will drive whether some of those action possibilities that are proposed are viable. If we're just going to we want to do more new construction, let's say, but if based on the limitations of tax credits or how much money we think we would have next year, we can really only do a handful of new units, then we probably don't need a new organization. We probably couldn't support a CDC if we don't have them figured out where the money would come from. Not in the first year anyway. Things like that, because we need to have enough volume to justify some new programs, not all, but some. And if we're looking at the con plan at the same time, if we want to shift some of there's been a lot of feedback about the effectiveness of the affordable housing programs, not so much the effectiveness, but the access and the need, how people in the neighborhoods, what they need to work on their own houses or make more progress than we've been seeing, then those might be different. We've had people turn in ideas that were not accommodated in the plan, even in this study, even already. And so again, if we're looking at what populations we want to serve and how fast we want to do it, that could very much drive the choices of the new, any new programming. Does that make sense?
Well, let me I guess I could say you asked about what does that mean, affordable housing actions in the primary focus, trying to keep us, trying to keep our focus as opposed to market development, market rate development, and ancillary actions that are might be considered more holistic. Our focus would be how do we get more unit at the end of the day, and I think that was much like what the con plan ties into. I was just making the assumption that we need to be moving down that sort of path as opposed to a path that starts to get into a lot of things that are not that they're not related, but some indirect support to creating unit production.
I see. So your intent on that was to say we're going to do affordable housing versus, for instance, the price range of new construction that was identified that would attract people to come and want to live in, the professional workers to come and live in Topeka instead of Lawrence or something like that, that we would not do that?
I would say that's a secondary focus. If the group wants to kind of treat those equally, for our task, I believe the affordable housing was the higher need. So no, I would say that in fact, you'll see, I think when we go through some of the tactics, it does touch on other things than affordable housing unit production, marketing ourselves, and doing some market rate stuff as well. That's part of the mix. It just wasn't the primary focus, I think, is what I was trying to get at.
I guess right after having this plan finished, I hate to miss a sector. For instance, and Michael and I, we've kind of got a working group going now with some neighborhood folks to just really do a deep dive into how things have been going for a while and what their ideas are for affordable housing. But if, for instance, we have a goal of getting $100,000 to $150,000 units built in this town, and some of our LMI neighborhoods have vacant lots that they want to get filled, it kind of depends on whether they want to stay perhaps a very blue-collar working-class neighborhood, or whether they'd be interested in hosting some of that new construction that would meet that other need in their neighborhood. And if we don't look at those, I mean, everything is, they did a great job with all the data, but those are needs too for our neighborhoods that you and I've talked about it, Bill. If we're going to build new housing, we want to make sure that that balance in that neighborhood is going to support the value, that it's going to be resellable or re-rentable, and all those things too. I just hate to see us, I don't want to overdo it, but I hate to see us think too small in terms of our vision and laying the groundwork now that we have all this study done.
Bill and Karen, let me interject something here. I know that myself and some of the NIAs in my district are not a part of this group with Karen's. I do think, though, that there is deep, deep concern that as we look at this affordable housing study, that we focus on exactly what we need to be focusing on, which is these critical care communities, these intensive care communities, the infill housing, making sure that I mean, I understand what you're saying about going out, you know, and trying to perhaps build new housing to bring new folks in. But until we deal with the multitude of problems, and we can see a lot of things intersecting right now, until we deal with the multitude of problems that we have in our underserved neighborhood, until we deal with issues that we also should be talking about as part of this in these meetings that we're having, how we're going to handle the multitude of drug houses that we are having in our neighborhoods, and how that is lessening the value of homes, and that is causing flight out of these districts as well. So I think that when we look at all of these very crunched, you know, items, accounting type focus and all of this, we cannot forget about what it's like in these neighborhoods and what they're dealing with right now, and the calls that they have to please help them do something. And I believe more than anything else, we should be focusing on housing rehab and building more units for folks that cannot afford the increasing housing costs. And I just need to put that in there because my district is one of those. We can pretty up the outside of Topeka all we want and say, come here, come here. But if we're not dealing with the multitude of issues that we have now in these at-risk, intensive care, critical care neighborhoods, we are creating a shell when Topeka can be more than a shell. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, before we move on, because we need to move on. Any other thoughts, comments to either of those or to the scope? I think we're recording this and we've got those comments down.
I have a comment.
Yes, please.
This is Steve Vogel. I sat on the Affordable Housing Task Force for about 2 years, and I know that the only thing that came out of that was this housing study, and I just hope that this can be different this time. But what I'd like to see, I think there's been good comments so far, is very specific recommendations, not just the view from 30,000 feet, like what Councilwoman Valdivia was talking about. How do you want to address that? Who should address that? If you want to have an affordable housing trust fund, let's have a plan. How are you going to get the money? Who are going to be the partners? Who are the people you've talked to? If you want to have a land bank, where's that going to be? Let's get much more specific. That would just be a suggestion I have, so at the end of 3 months, we're not looking the same way we did at the end of the Affordable Housing Task Force. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Steve.
Hey, Bill, if I could just jump in there.
Mhm.
And Steve, I had the pleasure of serving with Steve on that Affordable Housing Task Force, and it was a pleasure. I just wanted to jump in and I know that there's obviously some frustration about anything that takes a long time, but he said the only thing that came out of it was that the study. I would just mention that the partnership between the Topeka Housing Authority and Pioneer Group and then the city of Topeka to do the jump in with the historic tax credit and the tax credit project with the Van Buren School, the Carlson Building at 6th and Topeka, and I don't know how many, was it maybe 100 units? That would never have taken, I know that there's still some roadblocks there. That would never have taken place. Those people would never have gotten together. That project would not have happened had it not been for the Affordable Housing Task Force. And so anyway, there were other things that came out of that task force, not just the housing study. That's all.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate that.
Can I either make a comment or ask a question?
Yes, Linda.
This is Linda. This is a huge project. This is overwhelming, but it's needed. And what I'd like to piggyback on Chris's comments is this has opened up better communication between several different entities than I have seen in my 8 years as the Realtor Association director. So I think number one, that's the foundation, and a good place to start. Number two, and I hope I say this correctly, everything that was found in the housing study is a lot of points that have been an issue for a long time. Do we need to think about, are there things standing in the way of everything that we want to accomplish? Do we need to get, and I don't know that that's for this group, do we need to get clear down to the nitty gritty? Why are developers not coming? Why are we not seeing that infill? I mean, is there something else to consider that would keep our wonderful ideas from even happening in the first place? Does that make sense? And that might be way beyond our scope and not
Yeah.
even on topic. I'm just, that's a concern to me. Do we have the processes in place and the line of communication and the flexibility to make a plan work when we come up with it?
Oh,
Thanks, Lynn.
this is Katrina. I had the same thought as Linda, but in a different way. I mean, looking at the implementation matrix that was in the report, I was kind of just looking at that as homework. And I was thinking to myself, I mean, I don't know the answer to this, but are there some of those recommendations that don't have roadblocks that we could easily implement without a lot of funding, without a lot of, implementation needed, that would just be a policy change to say, from now on, this is how we're going to think about this. And those might be the easiest things to implement. And we can just say, okay, let's implement those and then work on the ones that do maybe have 1 or 2 hurdles that we need to really, work on. Like someone was saying earlier about the neighborhoods, those are such big issues that have so many moving parts that have to be taken into consideration. Let's maybe pick a couple of those things to focus on. But if there's a couple of things that would be easy, then let's do those too and get those underway without having to push those to the side. They'll get lost, I'm afraid.
Comment, please, Steve Shufflebine. It's sort of like, what can we do, what's feasible in this next 12 months? Like weatherization and renovation. Given the idea you have COVID, I don't know how this is impacting contractors to even be able to complete those kinds of activities, access to people's homes, for example. Just how much of a problem is that, as well as the capacity of our home repair folks. So, as well, and some of you that may have that expertise. I know Habitat does quite a bit of renovation, weatherization type work, but I know they may have some ideas as to the limitations of trying to increase that activity.
Good points. You're leading me into the next, or leading yourselves into the next topic on the agenda, because I will agree that the scope of work is one of those things, is what you hope to do. But as we go through this, as we go through our exercises here, we may come across something slightly different or alter that we want to include as part of our work. So I think for the most part, you've hit on some really good things, which includes keep focusing on that first year, which is kind of what we need to have some wins in place, some ongoing efforts that I know that are already going, that can be bolstered. The stuff that is doable, the stuff that is achievable, and then take on, a couple tasks that we aren't doing right now. It's a lot of, when you look at 24 plus tactics and others that people want to do, you can't do them all at once. So that's the whole point of this group, is to try and decide, have some consensus on what is it, not only do we want to take on, but what can we take on? And then we'll go from, we'll work through those actions and who does that. So to speak to, I think Steve said that about wanting to get more specifics. That's exactly what we are hoping to achieve here with this effort, with this short-term plan here. So, so what I wanted to jump into, so kind of, again, you're segueing me into and us into talking about those tactics that are part of the plan, those priorities, as you heard Dan talk about those 4 top priorities, and we've already mentioned those again, which is number 1, Affordable Housing Trust Fund, the weatherization expansion and creation of new, that's an expanded effort, but new sources for that. You had the CDC development, and then you also had the land bank establishment. So those were the top 4. There's a few others in that short-term horizon that you see here. So what we're talking about is over here in the short term for now. So all we want to do is talk about what we want to do, not necessarily how we are going to do it, although we certainly can provide some context if need be as to where we are on some of those things. But so from a staff recommendation standpoint, we certainly want to do the land bank and activate that. We certainly want to expand weatherization. And beyond that, we are not sure, and that's why we have this group, of what it is, what you think is doable, what you think is that we want to do. So I'll start with that. Do you have anything from those top 4 priorities coming out of the plan, the trust fund, the weatherization, CDC training, and land bank, are those in the first year any more, do we have the ability and wantability to activate those in the first year?
Bill, this is Mike Bell. I had a question, and I from what I remember, Tawny from Community Action is on the call as part of the meeting regarding the weatherization component. I know that Community Action historically has had a weatherization program, and I was kind of wondering how all of that was going to work together moving forward with whatever recommendations are made in the housing study.
Well,
Hi, this is Tawny. Would you like me to address that?
Please.
Bill, is that fine?
yeah, again, Mike, we want to stay on the what, but provide some context if you could, Tony, on your weatherization program at Community Action. I think that is I think that would help us work through some of that, if
Sure.
that's okay.
Yeah, not a problem. So Community Action is one of 4 grantees through a federal program that comes out of the Department of Energy that is also called weatherization. It is a very technical whole home energy efficiency and safety program. And I think is different in nature than what's discussed necessarily in the housing study and what's been discussed at the city level with the term weatherization. As my understanding is that there's a difference in the complexity and nature of what could be done through city weatherization efforts compared to what's done through the federal program, which is much more extensive and technical, but also really helps with housing stock. So we plan to continue our weatherization programming, provided that those resources continue to be available through the Kansas Housing Resources Corporation. But I don't necessarily personally, I haven't seen anything that presents sort of a duplication or conflict there, although if we can work together, that would maximize impact.
Okay. And I appreciate the clarification there. I guess the concern I had, if we're looking at the what and establishing weatherization as a goal, I needed that clarification. Thank you, Tawny.
Thanks, Mike and Tawny. And that's a really good point. If we want to use weatherization as this example, is the study tried to identify some gaps, and the gaps aren't necessarily, look, the findings isn't so much we have our programmatic issues. We don't have a program issue. We have a lot of good programs. What we're trying to develop is capacity to do more, and that's our real issue. So where one program is focused, there may be some gaps that another program can work hand in glove with to fill. So I think that's on the weatherization side. I know, and Corey, I don't want to put you too much on the spot, but Corey Wright with our housing division, is that something on the weatherization piece that you see there's some gaps to fill, if you will, or regardless of how much, I mean, the tremendous need that we see out there, but aren't there some key strategic gaps to fill?
Yeah, we do a lot of rehabilitation assistance, like especially with our emergency repair program, where we're seeing people that have some needs that are weatherization. The weatherization that we tried to implement in the consolidated action plan was definitely not even close to being similar to Community Action's Department of Energy program. Their regulations obviously are much more strict. So ours was simply something a little bit smaller. I think every little bit of weatherization has an impact on the household that's applying for it. And so if we can add to that, that was kind of something that we wanted to do.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Corey, I haven't met you, I'm sorry, but I'm not familiar. This is the local program, is that right? Through the city, or I didn't catch.
So right now we don't do weatherization with our programs at the city. The consolidated action plan, the 5-year consolidated action plan that we're proposing for 2021 and 5 years out, we did put a little money into weatherization, not a lot, but it's a little shift in money to help people with cost burden. There's a lot of people that are cost burdened, so we thought that would help.
So the program, or is there a program that's in place right now? Where is that, and how does that work?
So Community Action, as Tawny just mentioned, they have a really robust program. And then Habitat for Humanity does a program for homeowners as well.
And those people apply, or is there an evaluation similar, I mean, through Energy or anything like that could be a partnership?
Well, the city is not funding either of those programs, so they're getting their funding from another source.
Okay, all right.
Okay, very good information there. What about the other priority recommendations that came out? I don't think anybody would disagree on we need to activate the trust fund. And in the next meeting, we'll talk a lot more about how, but I think we're moving in a good path on that from what I can see. That has so much to do with what we can do with expanding our production in affordable housing. So so much hinges on that. What about the other two? The land, establish a strategic land bank. Should we be doing anything in the first year on that? Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
Bill, may I speak to that land banking need?
Sure.
So I think Steve earlier said some of these programs will be impacted by COVID, and all 4 of the strategic first year priorities I see as being really essential to a COVID response, with funding in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund for providers to do more and meet gap needs, as well as the expanded weatherization and rehab assistance when we're talking about people being safer at home. But the land banking, from my experience and in my current mind by just visiting with folks, is one of the strongest priorities that we see, because we don't have an avenue for those vacant and other homes that could be put into mixed use and readaptive use. And as we're looking at kind of funding shortages and a need to house people quicker and safer, the option to be able to acquire homes when they're not at demolition state and to rehab them from across the community, I think all of the affordable housing providers would probably agree with me, would probably be most beneficial, particularly when we're thinking about the possibility of things sitting in estates that don't have estates and things like that. So I think establishing a strategic land bank is really, really important.
And
Janice?
I would agree with Janice. My counterparts in other markets have had success with the land bank, especially Kansas City, Kansas, in restoring some of those areas that were a problem before. So I'm heavily in favor of that one as well.
Me too, Janice, over at Cornerstone. We talked about it before, you and I have, so yeah, good idea.
Does anybody have an opinion as to whether that would be something that we can accomplish activating in year 1, or should we, for the time, at least for now, be having a subgroup work on how that is going to actually come about, who's going to do it, what's it going to look like, and then come back sometime in that first year to present that. Does anybody have thoughts on how close that is to being activated?
Well, I've never been involved in setting one up, but I would be glad to do some homework and find out. I think there's different ways to set it up. I have some information that I've shared with, I guess it was Sasha, and our Momentum 2021 or 22 work group. So I've got a little bit of information I'd be happy to share with this group or whomever. I think the hard part is going to be deciding how we want it to work or how it should work, who the partners are. I think you have to have a board and an application. I mean, so there's some steps, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. There are a number of steps, which is why I was tending to lean that in the tier B. It's a priority, but we do need to work on that before we know or before we're ready to activate. And then the last one, CDC establishment, that's in our short term, year 1 to 3. Does anybody have any thoughts on whether that's something in year 1 we should be working towards or activating?
Bill?
Yes, Karen.
That's one of the ones that would be an example from my comments of we need to see how much volume we want to develop. You've got to, if you're going to actually create another organization versus identify what you want and build capacity in the organizations we have, you need to have an idea what you're trying to do and where you need help, if at all. So planning or even putting it into the mid-level, to me, till the planning's done and we see if we need one or have the potential one or more And I'm
Okay.
not saying no, we just don't have the numbers yet.
Okay. I got that. Yep. Okay, good comment. I know, not to move us on too quickly, but we do need to get to some other, I want to make sure we consider any other tactics that were mentioned in the study. And there's several up here right now that I'll just hit on, and then if anyone wants to comment, please do, as to whether you see these being a year one activation planning or even sub planning. Second chance tenancy.
Yes, I'd like to speak on this, Phil.
Yes, thanks, Teresa.
I'm the one who suggested this a couple of years ago. This is something that I've wanted to implement for quite some time. One of the obstacles to finding affordable housing is being able to qualify for it. Oftentimes people cannot qualify for decent housing because of their credit issues or their past rental history. So with this, and there are other communities who have had such training, it would be training where tenants get a second chance, so to speak. It could be a series of trainings, 2 to 3 trainings where we go over rights and responsibilities of Kansas landlord-tenant law, as well as things simple as cleaning a house, actual hands-on work with this, not just cleaning a house, but of all types of subjects in regard to rental housing. I've also talked to the Landlord Association just a little bit. I've talked to Steve Vogel just a little bit about this, and because at the end of the training, tenants would get a certificate that they could take to a landlord. Part of this would also be a mandatory rental housing counseling session, as well as a financial counseling session. It's all free of charge, of course, because we are funded by the city of Topeka. Tenant landlord counseling is anyway to provide this training and counseling. So I think that it would be a really good, something really good to implement, because if you're going to give people, if we're going to be building housing and working with people to expand housing, then we need to be teaching some tenants how to stay in that housing. It might also be good to help people with past felonies.
Okay. Very good. Thanks, Teresa. That helps a lot of us understand where that is. So it sounds like kind of is that something that needs to have a bit of a subgroup work on that, or is that something that's needs to be fleshed out?
It's fairly easy to implement. It's something that I just need to talk a little bit more with the landlords and get their feelings about it. But yeah, it's fairly easy to implement.
Okay.
Can I interject something here, Bill?
Yes, sure.
I think that this second chance tenancy sounds like a good program. I would also hope that in addition to the Landlord Association being a part of this, that there also be other stakeholders involved in this. As a former civil rights fair housing investigator, I saw a number of times where Americans that folks that fell under the ADA, Americans with Disability Act, that were wanting just basic fair housing accommodations were often threatened with evictions. And sometimes we were not able to stop those evictions because we just had one fair housing investigator at the time. And now that I'm not sure how much fair housing is even a component at the state level, the reason I'm bringing this forth is when we're talking about second chance tenancy, we would, I hope, come at it from a point of there may be some actual unfounded reasons why folks were actually evicted. So I think that we have to, and I'm not saying in all of the cases, because I know that there are often those that, you know, have not been good tenants or have not been able to afford their rent or whatever. But I also think there should be some kind of advocacy on this part, since we're trying to work in a collective manner that also puts the perspective of the tenant on board as well. And I'm also going to just bring it home, because I will keep driving this home. We have to be looking at the landlords that are the good landlords. Good, give them incentives, give them props, give them awards. But the ones that hide under the cloak of being a part of an association, that are doing things they should not be doing, or keeping tenants that are actually selling drugs out of their homes, which destabilizes entire neighborhoods. I'm going to keep bringing this up over and over, because this has to be part of that dialogue if we're really going to try to implement real change. Thanks.
Thank you for saying that. I just want to say that we do implement fair housing training. We counsel people about fair housing issues every single day. It's a big part of what we do, and we find it very important. And yes, that would very much be part of second chance tenancy. I just gave a very brief overview.
I have a comment. I'd like to throw this out there just for discussion, because I think it would maybe give everyone a perspective of the way a landlord looks at this. What would some of the charitable groups, or what would you think about doing something as simple as co-signing for some of these tenants? Do you think that's a good idea, bad idea? A lot of these people that are, say, marginal, maybe they have some evictions, bad credit rating. Would any of you, the groups out there, consider, like United Way or whoever, consider co-signing for any of these tenants? Why or why not?
Steve, this is Tawny at Community Action. I'd have to know more details.
Well, I think that goes to my point. I think when you're a landlord, and I know one of the focuses is going to be how do we reduce evictions? And when I spoke before the city council, and it's been about 5 weeks ago, I said, who are they? Who is going to rent to them? How are you going to avoid evictions? As a landlord, I can say the best way to avoid an eviction is to not rent to these marginal tenants in the first place. That's because I can speak from experience, and I know a whole lot of other landlords can too. When you do rent to them, many times, it just doesn't end well. If you rent to someone who has a lot of prior evictions, the chances of them having another eviction are probably pretty high. If you rent to someone with very bad credit score, the chances of an eviction are probably pretty high. So that's why I was wondering if any of the charitable organizations would co-sign for them, that would transfer some of the risk from the landlord to the charitable organization. Because I can tell you, I hope it doesn't sound mean-spirited, but I don't want to do that. I don't want to take that risk. I've been through it before, and so many times it doesn't end well. But I think that's a really good thing that we should discuss.
Yeah, I get where you're going, Steve, and it's a little bit like what the Catholic Charities has a program, I think with, they did with Cap City Bank. I'm not sure now that Cap City Bank is Cap Fed. I'm not sure if it still exists, but I think it does, where they partner with Catholic Charities and the people that basically can never get out of payday loans. They work with people, okay, let's say their payday loan, it's $800 and they can't get out of it. Okay, they pay off the payday loan, and now their loan is with, let's say in this case, Cap Fed. Okay, and now the interest rate is, let's say 9%. It's not, 1,000% or whatever, the legal, or, whatever it used to be at the payday loan. Now, the way the bank was a partner with it is because, they don't talk about it publicly, but the bank was covered. The bank was covered by a grant, and Catholic Charities had the grant to do this. But it also built up a banking relationship for that consumer. So they could then make payments to the bank. It was a reasonable payment schedule, and if they did pay it off at they had a reasonable rate, they could pay it off a reasonable time, then they had a banking relationship, and maybe they can get a checking account. So what you're talking about is a little bit like that. Obviously, it's a much harder because you're talking about it's a monthly rate thing. I mean, it's a monthly rent thing, and that's, you know, if someone had an $800 payday loan, you know, they might have an $800 a month rent. So that's 1 month. So, I mean, I guess conceptually, I get where you're going. I can just speak from another landlord's perspective, and we are a second chance landlord, a cornerstone. And especially we have 145 units and 175 units. In the 23 units that we have that are dedicated to the homeless, those are completely second chance. And we do take people in all of our units with evictions, with felonies. And I can tell you that we evict probably 12 to 15 tenants a year. And by the time we evict them, we have worked with them with every possible way we can. And they usually owe us at least 2 months rent. And by the time they get out, it's 3 months rent. And they've usually done lots of damage to the properties. And we are the big-hearted, sympathetic, nonprofit landlord. And that happens to us. Well, those people that skate on us, they find someplace else to live. And so we can all talk about landlords, but the worst tenants find the worst landlords. And they go out, and maybe they go to Highcrest or they go to other parts. But I'm telling you what, and everybody who's a landlord and everybody who's been a tenant, they usually find each other. They usually find each other.
I think that's an excellent point. I think this is we could talk about this a long time. I remember you saying the same thing on the Affordable Housing Task Force, and I am 100% agreement. But I think I guess my basic point is, who takes the risk? Who do you think should take the risk on some of these marginal people who apply for a rental property? Should the landlord take the risk? Should someone else take the risk? Would you take the risk? Would you put your funds on the line? Because that is, from the perspective of the landlord, that is a decision that they have to make. So yeah, I think this is an excellent discussion, but I'll leave it at that.
All right, thank you, you guys. That was pretty cool. If you haven't noticed that we have a chat feature on this, and some of you are using it, and we're talking about that exact idea, Steve, that you threw out there. So I'm not trying to throw any blanket on it. We just kind of need to, for the sake of time, move on. I think there's some good stuff there. Some people have some good comments about moving along with that second chance tendency and your ideas. So even in the first year, so I think that's a good sign. In terms of, I know Ivan had his hand up. He's put in some comments in the chat and absolutely wants to move that Affordable Housing Trust Fund forward. And yes, we're going to be talking about how to do that. Absolutely. But I need to get to some other ideas just so we can flesh all these out and make sure if there's anybody else has any comments. There's aging, and there's two other ones on here: aging in place and rehab assistance that are viewed as short-term tactics. Aging in place, I know I would appreciate maybe somebody, and I don't know if Janice or somebody is doing that right now or has a program that could explain what that is, what are those components, and how close are we to, I see it's an expanded effort, so how are you or others doing it?
Sure, I can address that. As far as I know, we're the only program in town that has a dedicated aging in place program. Our program is funded through the county commission through the special programs for the elderly, as well as 3 matching grants. And it is dedicated to low income and moderate income aging individuals over 55 to keep them in their homes with autonomy, dignity, and respect, usually through small to moderate home repairs, generally addressing accessibility However, that has to be a holistic effort. You have to look at more than just housing. You have to look at food insecurity, social isolation, medication access, and things like that. We complement the city very well with their emergency repair and accessibility program on that to really go after a few different, we usually work on the same house, to be very honest, providing different assistance. It is the most in need program that we have, including our new construction and homeownership programs. And it is the largest increasing population in our city and in our nation. So it definitely is something that could be expanded upon. But I don't think these things exist on an island. I think that things like the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and the land banking and the other things that we're talking about would complement these programs really well. And I also think that perhaps maybe not everyone on this call or Zoom knows all of the programs that are currently in place. So there may be an educational issue as we move forward and knowing what exists and how to not recreate the wheel.
Very good.
I know one thing, this a lot more simple than what Janice was talking about, but I know it's been a couple of years ago now, one of our tenants, and I didn't even know they were doing this, they applied for what I believe it was SORT money, and they had a wheelchair ramp put on one of our rental houses. And it just worked out terrific for everyone. There was no cost to us, and it served them well, and they were happy, we were happy. And it, you know, they're like 75 years old and they don't get around too well, but that was a good example of something pretty simple that is an existing program that's in place, and it was a win-win situation.
I don't think that these programs operate exclusively of one another, Steve. So the city's emergency repair and their accessibility program complements them really well. But I would even consider Meals on Wheels and Midland Care an extension of this type of work, and ensuring that everyone is safe and in good housing and able to stay at home. It is as simple as ramps and rails sometimes, and it is as massive as complete soffit and gutter rebuilds at times. So it's just something that needs to probably continually be looked at, and more funds are always helpful. So I'll go right back to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund nudge with that one.
Regarding aging in place, I would also suggest, if we haven't already approached them, the Jayhawk Area Agency on Aging, as someone who could provide a lot of insight on this issue. And I'm glad to see that that is part of the short-term list of goals.
Okay.
May I say something? I would totally agree with Janice. Probably she said that there's a lack of knowledge about all of the resources, and that probably came from my questions. I know I feel like I have a whole, I don't know what all of our resources are. Is there a list? I mean, where do we go to find that? You're right. We don't want to recreate the wheel if something's already there.
Well, Linda, that was a perfect segue, because I was going to bring up the last thing here, which is rehab assistance, which is also should read rehab and maybe technical assistance, which could mean, again, it's an expanded effort of the programs that we have out there, but also a better coordination and communication for folks to know what's out there. I don't know if anybody else wants to chime in on that, but I know in terms of what we heard during the study, there could be a need to provide more listing of contractors, technical assistance for how to maintain housing, and just all the barriers that go into keeping or reinvesting in the housing stock. So I don't know if anybody else has more thoughts on that for our year one, if that's an expanded effort, or what?
Yeah, I would like to make a comment. What you're talking about is good, but I think that it's not even a close call. The best case scenario is to have responsible private real estate investors do that. There's no cost to the city. There's no cost to any government, any other organization anywhere. I know that for my wife and I, we have never asked for any type of assistance. We've done it all with our own money. That's the way I choose to do it. And that is to try to create an environment in this city that heartily encourages private investors to do just what you're talking about. I think, in my opinion, should be the absolute #1 priority of any type of rehab effort in the city.
Bill, this is Katrina. I was just going to add that, I mean, I think maybe it's a longer term project, like what you're talking about, training and other things. But at the very least, if we could come up with just a place where all of these resources are listed somewhere, where it's just even a list, I think that would help a lot of people, so that if a person comes to any one of us for a different reason, someone may be coming to Janice for aging in place assistance, or someone may be coming to someone else for, landlord assistance or something. We can look at the list and say, well, you need to talk to so-and-so over at, Jayhawk or one of these other agencies, because I'm with Linda. I don't know where to send people if they're coming to me with a question that's not in my wheelhouse. And I think that would be easy to implement if we could figure out who would do that and where it would live. That's maybe the hard part.
Right. Yeah, good point.
Steve,
Okay.
I know in some of our research with Topeka Jump, I think it was, there is a resource directory. It's one of those places located over there in Highcrest. I forget. I thought that was with you, Tawny, Community Action.
No, it's CRC.
CRC, Community Resource Council. I was thinking that was it, Chris, but I didn't want to go that way. Yeah, Community Resource Council has that. And it's specific in their index for housing types of resources, housing support services.
Bill, can I interject real quick? I don't know if this is considered an elephant in the room. I think it needs to be put out, not so much that we would be able to handle in 1 year or even be able to do anything about it in 1 year. But one of the main components that kept drawing out to me in the housing study was cost burden, like 30% of folks are cost burden, and also that we do not have a living wage in this town. We have so many services out there for folks that are in need, that cannot make their rent, that cannot buy enough food. Now we have COVID on top of that. And we know the strain that that's putting on businesses. But as we look at this affordable housing study for this plan, in my opinion, we must look at those things that we feel that we don't have any control over, but we have a lobbyist in the city and we have folks that can start pushing businesses to start contemplating seriously a living wage, because we do not have living wage that starts out in the city itself. I was a single mother for almost 15 years and I did not have the education I do now. But there's a lot of folks out there that are like me and others I know, where they are working 2 jobs, where they have 2 children, where they are just trying to make ends meet. And I understand we're in a time of COVID. I understand we're trying to make all these plans. But if we don't deal with base level issues, and a base level issue here is that we do not have a living wage, and that the folks are seriously cost burdened. This is also some of the dialogue that has to be had. Whether you have it on the periphery, I understand it's not going to be a part of the 1 year, but to look away from that is to look away from a hard part of this study that just blazes out if you thoroughly look through the whole thing and really consider again how all of this is intersected.
Yeah, very good point. There's a lot of stuff in the study that needs to be highlighted more, and I thank you. That's one of those things that yeah, you know, there's an income issue as much as an affordable housing issue. So to that end, it is probably outside of our scope, but that doesn't mean we can't be talking about how are there actions to take to make progress on that. So I want to respect everybody's time here. Is there anything? Are there any other tactics? Whether they're at the, you see some tactics at the bottom there that are continued efforts. There's a lot of things that are going on there that could be done in the first year or continue to be done. I just want to give one last shot. Does anybody have anything else they want to prioritize for the first year in our action plan? And there's a lot of good chat going on, by the way. So thank you. we're taking that all in.
It sounds like we left off with rehab, that it could either be a first year program or one that, it depends on how soon people could get the list made, or it could be one of your tier B or 2 or whatever you called it, where people would actually put that together. I will tell you that as we've kind of been reviewing what's happening in the neighborhoods and the fact that often the city has had trouble getting takers for their big comprehensive affordable housing or rehab, full rehab programs, yet the enhancement program was very, very popular and people have asked for it back. So one of the things that's come out of that is find ways where people sort of do it yourself or do one project at a time and continue working on their homes. And so what you all are talking about really fits that. And it could be, as people were saying, but I mean, we need to always remember that some things don't cost anything, or if you just have a really good list and maybe somebody who's managing that list, that might be it. We also see in the neighborhoods where someone who's a homeowner has been written up and then they just don't get the repairs done, that they've just never done that before. They don't know somebody who can fix a porch. They don't know somebody who can paint their house. And so correspondingly, again, that's how it ties into that whole matrix. But if we think about that too, the city took a little run at trying to line up volunteers. I know that there are some organizations that are doing that now. And so rolling that all into both the classes that are free at Lowe's or Home Depot or whatever, and then the things that tool bus that Janice has and all the things they provide, just as a really great collection to put together of things we already have, and maybe some gap filling by match money, or even I'm just brainstorming, asking Lowe's to donate, I don't know, a truckload of porch lights or something like that for people to improve safety and improve their homes. And we've got a lot of possibilities with rehab.
Agreed. Okay.
One other mention is that for some reason, the Housing and Credit Counseling's tenant landlord counseling did not get listed on the continued efforts. And that is so valuable in and of itself. For low-income people, the most draining thing is moving. And so keeping people in their homes, and then obviously that counseling partners with code compliance as well, when everything's working right, so that they're staying right where they are and are in safe and affordable housing, maybe when they weren't before. So maybe people look at this list and see other things that are ongoing, things that somehow slipped off and aren't included. Maybe we can update this as part of what you're producing, Bill.
Yeah, that's fine. I don't know that we have an exhaustive or 100% list here, but these were the things that I know had come up in the talking to people.
Right. Like the tool bus, for instance, it's not on there, and it's great.
No, but that would be something that could fit under, again, the rehab assistance, for instance. So, yeah. Okay. Very good. I need to probably move us on. This has been excellent talk on our tactics. We will come back we may even ask some of you to do some work in between meetings in terms of what our year one looks like, and those tactics, and the ongoing efforts, and get those organized for you for the next meeting. And hopefully you can even be meeting in between here and talk about actions, which is what we really are going to need to talk about next time. The last thing we have on here, or next to last, is talk about metrics and measures. I have a starter list here. It's not meant to exclude or include anything, but just when we looked at what was going to help us measure and what our targets were going to be for that first year, you know, the things that came to mind were, first of all, investment. And that investment can take the shape of public investment. It can take the shape of private investment. The trust fund is a perfect example of a target that we should have. And Dan kind of went sort of the $500,000 target for the trust fund in the presentation, and how much of that could be seeded by public, how much could be private. So that's a sort of metric to measure our progress that we would recommend having. As to what that would be, we will. I think that's kind of what we want to talk about next time. But the investment would be one. Second would be a very basic unit count. How many units are we doing? Karen's brought this up repeatedly, and it's a very important thing to understand. It's hard to have a target. It's kind of it's a little bit chicken and the egg, because it's the resources you're dealing with, and will depend a lot on your target. But also, we need to have a goal, and a goal of how many units we can achieve for X amount, say in that trust fund, for instance, as an example, or in a weatherization program, or in a land bank, and how many properties or units or are we going to be able to target to develop and construct or preserve, and then how many households does that serve? So those are kind of some basic unit counts that we can break down more, but those were my initial thoughts in terms of what types of targets we would need to figure out. Let me stop there before we get into more advanced stuff. But any questions, thoughts on that? Okay. Hopefully nobody's trying to talk with their mute on.
Bill, I was just going to say, I think those are really good metrics. I think having a number of units, both on the affordable housing rental side, but on the home ownership side is great. Dollars invested. I would maybe encourage, and I don't have a checkbook, so it's not coming from me, but I would encourage maybe setting that first year's goal higher than $500,000. I would say maybe going with $1 million on that one.
Okay, so we hear $1 million. Do I hear no? Okay, good. Trey, wait.
Isn't it easy to bump that from $500,000 to $1 million when he starts off with, "I don't have my checkbook"?
Yes, yeah. You noticed that.
That's awesome, Trey.
I'll help on the other side. I'm sorry, I just don't have the cash.
Steve's gonna raise it. He signed up. Didn't you see the chat?
Right.
Good. No, that's good, because we're going to need to get into that next meeting, and we'll try and put a few options out there for you guys to settle on. But yeah, the renter owner thing is excellent. In terms of the types of units, you know, we've got for instance, we have so many affordable housing, we have so many workforce housing, we have so many senior housing, we have so many market rate, all that laid out in the study. And I think we could break it down to as far as we want to, but on the affordable housing side, I really, getting a baseline for what we do now, and then going beyond that, I think will be really, really helpful. Okay, so advanced, and these kind of came out of the study as some of the things that are important or made an impact in the findings. We've already mentioned the percent of households paying more than 30%. Those are the cost burden, housing cost burden percentages that we talked about in the presentation, and others have mentioned. There's down payment assistance. There's evictions, which is actually a metric that I don't believe locally keep. I think that is done by another organization that does that across the nation. Homelessness, we certainly have our ways of counting and keeping track of that already. Investments by by geography more, the neighborhood health, or where are we, where is, once we know what that investment, how much that is, where is it going? Is it going into those areas of need or not? And then typology mix, which is just kind of getting at the fact that we need to do more between the single family and the large multifamily. Smaller multifamilies, duplexes, triplexes, townhomes, those are what we're kind of getting at with that. We are currently pretty heavy on detached single family, for instance. We haven't done a lot of new smaller multifamily or townhome or duplex. So we want to keep track of that to make sure we have a good cross section for our inventory. So those, any other anything you like, anything you want to bring up that's not there that you think we should have in the mix to measure our progress?
I have a comment regarding, Bill, what you were just got done talking about, single family, multifamily and all that. I don't know if Ivan Weiker's still on here, but he could address that, I know, way better than I have. But it goes back to the business climate and how easy it is to do business, to construct a new house or a new apartment building in the Topeka area. Because I have heard, I heard Mr. Weichert speak at the Highcrest NIA. I don't know, it's probably been over a year ago, but I think that a lot of the builders around here, they have a lot of trouble with the city. They're not what I would call a friendly partner, you know, and please correct me if I'm wrong, someone, but I think that's something that really needs to be kept in mind because that's going to really impact how much we can do going forward.
I'll just add that we build all the time, and we build apartments. I mean, we build duplexes, we build single family homes, we build in different zoning types, and we work with contractors, and we've had very minor issues, and almost all of our stuff's been built on time, and when it hasn't, it certainly hasn't been because of city things. And that
this is Ivan.
Years of my experience in building probably 22 different units in 6 or 7 different projects.
Hey, Bill.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, Ivan.
I think what he's speaking of was, yes, he mentioned quite some time ago, ever since Richard Faulkner took over the building division, I think we've experienced some great progress in how those things are handled at the city. And we no longer have those kinds of problems in construction, but I'd say our biggest hurdles now are the soaring construction material costs. We've suffered some real changes in those areas, and it makes it nearly impossible to construct new as an affordable project. But I think what one of the other people mentioned was finding persons who would commit to support efforts like this, and perhaps our housing trust fund getting off the ground. I think we could make some real headway with that. But the working with the city is much better these days.
Well, that's good. I stand corrected.
Well, so thank you, Ivan. I appreciate that. So in terms of, new development, I mean, it comes down to a math problem for the most part. And that's what our trust fund, and that's what a lot of our actions that we're going to be looking at are going to try and bridge. Anything else though in terms of a metric or a measure that we have not mentioned, or anything that anybody likes? And then we're going to move on and wrap this thing up.
Bill?
Yes.
Just in terms of those, again, this gets back to the neighborhood discussions and my old nonprofit background. I do think that we need to be measuring our metrics by outcomes and making our plans by outcomes. What is it we needed? And that's going to be driven by the people, maybe low-income people who need certain kinds of housing, or neighborhoods who need certain kinds of housing. But I hope that our goal is not just not to know, Bill, how many outputs did we have? How many houses did we rehab? But we're looking at seniors that need to have help, or people, the aging in place business, the opportunities for first-time home buyers, and like Toto, for instance, which I think will continue. And so not only first-time home buyer, but fixing up a house that was deteriorated in a neighborhood. Those measures of why we're doing this. Not that we would want to pass up an opportunity for some big fat grant or something somewhere, but to build tiny houses just to say we did, for instance.
Right.
This having a neighborhood or a group that thinks that would be the best thing to accommodate their needs. See what I'm saying? Just want us to start with needs always, and then measure the accomplishments accordingly.
Good point. Yeah. Okay. A lot of good stuff on the chat there I'm seeing. We do. So I suspect we might have a few people that need to have a little more expertise in these sort of metrics specifically, or want to delve into that more. So we might need a subgroup to come up with those, but we'll, if anybody is interested in doing more that type of work, let us know. All right, so the next steps, we talked about at the beginning the need to have some form of public engagement. The question, and the question is maybe how that looks and when. We have a study, we have as fledgling here scope and some good ideas to put out there as to what we need to focus on. So I guess we don't necessarily have an actionable plan laid out yet. So I would ask, does anybody have thoughts about when we engage the public in terms of something to react to, or early on like this meeting to get input based on what we're talking about here today? I thought, my initial thought was something between the first meeting and the second meeting, again, just to have this sort of discussion, just to have these sort of questions thrown out and get some feedback. Then if so, how do we do that? in a public way. Any thoughts on that?
I know that the neighborhoods have been really speaking up about wanting to be engaged in planning of these things. I don't know where the decisions get made, but it would seem that going to the CAC and maybe with their permission, and because everybody from the neighborhoods is already, or a rep from each neighborhood is already going, and maybe with their permission opening it up, but not setting a separate meeting might be a good venue for people to join them. Somebody else here would know when they meet. I think it's either the first or second Wednesday of each month. Should be pretty quick turnaround from today, but not bad for October maybe. And looking at where people already are and people that care about it and know about things. Just a thought.
Okay. So kind of do it through the CAC is one idea, if you will, open that up. Do you see a kind of the benefit, any value benefit to having something in that's not on? That's my problem is how do we include people that want to be included without it being on a Zoom call? So
This may have nothing to do with it, but it just kind of occurred to me. Tamari Quinn with the Capital Journal, I believe it was last week, put out an editorial committing the newspaper to doing more stories in communities of color. And although that does not directly relate, I suppose, to what we're doing, one could see that as an opportunity, given that people of color do populate many of our NIAs. I guess I don't know that I'm making the connection as clearly as I could, but there might be an opportunity to maybe get with the CJ and let people know what we're doing and how they can comment and that kind of thing.
I think there's something there, Mike. Yeah.
I would say too, Michael, on this side, over here on this end in District 2, there's a lot of LMI working poor folks here, white folks, and Black and brown folks. So what we're talking about is, yes, racial, which it specifies in that study, and it also talks about white folks that are in situations of poverty, multiple jobs. And so I think that Tamari's commitment to shedding light on issues, again, we're talking intersectionality. I think that that is a great idea to possibly approach her with, Michael.
Michael, did I hear you volunteering?
What was that again, Bill?
Is your microphone on? It may have been, yeah, hard, yeah.
Let's visit on that. Yeah, that's something I'd like to do.
Okay. All right. Good ideas there. We'll follow up on that, and on both of those, I think are worth doing. Do we have any? Is there any additional information we need? And that's beyond what we've been talking about. I know there was a lot of little tidbits that have been put out there that were helpful and some questions. But is there anything else we're missing, I guess, before we move on to our next meeting that we should be conscious about?
Well, I suppose real quickly, and I don't know how all of this might ultimately work into a final proposal for a housing study, but I visited with you via email, Bill, on this issue And I really love the data that's contained in the housing study, and we'll continue to talk about a lot of that and how to approach it. But I guess the one thing that's kind of missing for me that I think maybe we should consider including are the actual stories in real time of people who are living with these challenges, and maybe also taking more time to discuss the historical nature of a number of the neighborhoods that are most affected by affordable housing. And by that, I mean, essentially Topeka's foundational neighborhoods, the neighborhoods that built this city. And maybe there ought to be some discussion about those neighborhoods and their histories and how all of that ties in then to what we're trying to accomplish.
I think that's an excellent idea, Michael. I really do. If I could make a suggestion, if you can see this, the book is Evicted by Matt Desmond. There's a whole bunch of things, all the eviction statistics, those are from Eviction Lab. All of that arose from this book. It is something I would encourage everyone to read, particularly the people who are on this call. It would give us something that we could, in common, that we could talk about. But also, Michael, to your point, specific stories from Topeka neighborhoods. I think that's a terrific idea.
Well, I'm very lucky, and Karen, I know, signs off on this too, because we both represent either directly or indirectly Tennessee Town and all of the history that's contained in there, in that neighborhood. But you also look at any number of other central Topeka neighborhoods. You look at Oakland, you look at the North Topeka neighborhoods, you look at Central Highland Park and what's going on in East Topeka. You look at, you can look everywhere and just see, you know, where there are affordable housing challenges, all of this great history. It's a selling point, I think, ultimately, as people are now moving back towards city centers.
I think again,
Hey, guys.
the crossovers too, Michael. Years ago, I mean, and all these things we did that were cool things that we could do again. Years ago, Tennessee Town had, in a couple of neighborhoods, had Kansas State students, urban planning students come as a class project and do every single block of their neighborhood. Those were where the original neighborhood plans came from. And they had all these great ideas. And if we're crossing over well, and the neighborhood plans are being used by the neighborhoods anyway. For instance, the Ice House in Tennessee Town, they did plans for how to turn it into senior housing, and the Ice House is still sitting there falling apart. You know, just lots of options.
Yes.
Hey guys, this is Gary Cushenberry. Can I digress? I was unable to unmute myself when we were talking about Tamara Coyne in the Cap Journal. I sit on the editorial board. I'd be more than happy to carry the water with Tamara, or at least trying to loop the CJ into the process.
Yay!
But my only thought is, once it hits the paper, people are going to start expecting results, and you know, our internal clock is going to be ticking as soon as it hits the paper.
All right, well, Mike, you're a little bit off the hook there. So you should take Gary out for ice cream or something.
Yeah, and I'd be more than happy. And I think Tamar, with the reorganization of the newspaper, Tamar's commitment to our local community was what a lot she was talking about. Gannett is going to be more of a, we were going to be more of a regional publication, but Tamara has committed to making sure she stays plugged into the local community. And so I feel very comfortable with Tamara being a part of that. And again, I'll carry the water however you need me to do that as far as with the Capital Journal.
And let me know if I can be of any assistance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's great. Because I know there are some stories buried in the study that are very impactful, and not necessarily personal stories, but certainly, you know, you get into the history of redlining, and many of the things that were pointed out that you know about, but it really was very detailed in the study as to how the neighborhoods challenges that we're dealing with today did not happen in a vacuum, did not happen overnight. And so we have a story there, and I think that would be really, I think, part of what we want to get out, if I'm reading you right, Mike.
Well, yeah, and that certainly is part of the story I think that needs to be told. I guess I'm just thinking that we'll stand a better chance to affect the kind of change we're talking about if we have a housing study that, at least to some degree, has heart and soul, if that makes any sense.
Heart and soul, and
no, I'm not going to sing that.
Yeah, I was going to say. All right. Well, too bad. All right. Well, thank you. We're scheduling another meeting. Obviously, we want to do that probably in the same time frame of the month to give us some time to accomplish some things here. So I'm looking at the last week of September just to put people on notice, if you will, and then probably a follow-up third meeting in the last week of October. Unless anybody has any other thoughts on that second meeting or what we need to accomplish, I think we're going to have to organize ours and help you with some of these next steps in between the meetings and put something together so you can react to it for September. That being said, does anybody have any parting thoughts or words or hopes? Thank you. It's been, hey, if you haven't seen this chat, the chat has been awesome. Thank you for everybody participating in that while we were talking. Again, this is recorded. We will put this out there, get some minutes to it, and come back and see. And we will probably be talking to some of you in the meantime as well and seeing you. So thanks again, everybody.
Thanks, Bill.
All right, appreciate it.
Okay, stay well.
You too.